Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of the Oliver Perry Show. Today, I've got Mr. Mike Lembeck. He is a specialist, particularly in the SOCAL market, as well as he's been in the game since 1989, working in multifamily. He also understands 1001 exchanges and a litany of other things with bank foreclosures. Everything you can think of, he knows. But today, we're going to focus on today's market and how you can survive in it. Let's get to it. Mike, welcome to the show, man.
All right, thanks. Thanks for having me.
It's my pleasure, man. My absolute pleasure. You've done a lot in these umpteen years when it comes to real estate and multifamily. And I don't want to waste your time because you're very good at what you do. And I'm excited to have you on because I've watched your videos and I've learned more from your videos on data than I ever thought I would. But I want to give you the opportunity to give that same knowledge to everybody who's listening. So let's just go ahead and jump right into it. And let's talk about the market as you see it right now. What do you see that's happening in the market and where do you think it's going to go next?
Well, right now, of course, with the interest rate increases and everything that we've had, the market has slowed. Buyers or investors have backed out of the market. We've seen some deals have fallen apart because financing, when they put the property under contract, the financing made or the property made sense with the financing that was available. Now, if they didn't lock their rate, then now they're looking at potentially the numbers don't make any sense anymore. So they're
Mm,
either trying to retrade that asset with that seller or just backing out of the deal altogether just due to the numbers not property not cash flowing. They're maybe having to come up with a higher down payment or having cold feet just from thinking that the market isn't going in the direction that they want it to go, and they're anticipating further interest rate increases, which potentially could bring values down further. We have seen values drop already, certain areas more than others. So,
right.
where we're headed is probably more of the same and more of a decline in values. That's what, and not me, my personally, I'm looking at potentially just kind of staying on the sidelines and watching and not even looking at investing or anything like that. So,
Okay.
it's just kind of a wait and see game, which again, the majority of the people are doing or buyers are doing right now.
Right. So then let me ask you this then. You've been in the game for a very long time and you are in a position where you kind of you're in the holding position, if you will. But for those who are just starting, if someone to come into the market right now, what would be your advice to them? How would you tell them to tackle what's happening in our economy as we speak?
Well, right now, if you're a buyer, you want to buy for cash flow. You don't want to
Okay.
buy for appreciation. If as long as you can buy that property and it will cash flow from day one and you'll have, income coming in from it, then
Right.
sure, the values they could come down, they could drop 5%, 10%, but eventually that property is going to go up in value. The old saying is don't wait to buy real estate and wait. So, if you hold that property long enough, it's going to go up in value and it's going to recover. We've recovered back from what we were in 2008 from the downturn then.
Right.
Values are higher than they were then. So it's as long as it's going to cash flow and you don't have to feed that property every single month, then it's not a bad deal,
Right.
because you're going to be making money on it every single month.
Now, do those rules? Do you feel like that rule applies for not just the residential multifamily, from the 2 to the 5 or 2 to the 4, as well as commercial, or is it a little bit different depending on which one you're after?
Well, with commercial properties, 5 plus, typically those are going to be a different structure in financing. They're going to have either an adjustable loan or maybe an adjustable that's got a balloon in 5, 7, or 10 years. So,
Right.
you're going to look at that and say, will I be able to refinance this asset once that balloon payment becomes due? Because you've got to be able to pull the money out of it that you owe, and
Right.
then of course some additional, because they're not going to give you 100% financing. They're going to give you on a cash out refi, I mean a refinance. You're going to look at maybe 75 to 80% loan to value. So you got to make
Okay.
sure you got to have that equity position in there still of your down payment. You've got to have enough equity for them to be able to want to refinance it.
Got it. Okay. So you actually spoke a little bit earlier and you talked about not just the fact that you're holding and waiting. Well, yes, that you're holding and waiting, but also the main part for that to me was the wait part. What are you waiting to see? What are you looking for that's going to trigger you to say, okay, it's time for me to make a move now?
Well, I think where we're headed is a few more interest rate increases.
Mm-hmm.
If we There's talk about potentially having interest rates coming back down again in maybe the middle of next year. That if that starts to happen and the numbers make sense again from, we're kind of spoiled with what we've had over the last couple of years with these lower interest rates. But
Mm-hmm.
if we can get back down into, say the threes, the fours, and maybe in the 5% range, then the properties are going to make more sense because you've had potentially another 6 to 12 months of rent increases that have occurred. Because in
Mm-hmm.
California, you can't raise those rents, but maybe once a year, and up to 10% is about the max because it's consumer price index plus 5%. That's what our rent control law is in California.
Right.
So in other states, it could be completely different with no rent control. So if we can see those rates come back down, then and the values stabilize, because right now they are still coming down, and even on a month to month basis, we're seeing it. So
Right.
once with those values stabilize, we see interest rates coming down a little bit. Then I think that's going to be the time to say, well, okay, this we've gone through this transition, and then also inflation has to be under control because that's what's going to stop them from raising those rates, or the Fed from raising the rates.
Right.
So we get all three of those come together, then you start looking at potentially a buying, because then you're going to be able to buy appreciation at the same time as you want to buy cash flow.
Got it. Okay. So where are you watching? Where are you watching to see this happen? Because you spoke you because you know how you got a lot. Oh, excuse me. You've got a lot of access to data and things of that nature. But for the regular Joe like me, what am I? Where am I watching and saying, all right, this is where I'm going to watch to see this. What's exactly what Mike was telling me about? Where do I need to go and look?
Okay. Well, you want to look at the interest rates. Get yourself subscribed to a lender who sends you the interest rates on a weekly basis, so you can monitor those. Subscribe to some of the other multifamily or commercial property newsletters or emails. One of them is globestreet.com. It's GLOBE and ST.com. Go to their website, subscribe to their multiple newsletters that they have. They're constantly giving me information on what's going on with the market. And then, just kind of get yourself hooked in with a multifamily broker and have them send you properties so that you can kind of monitor and see what's going on with rents and with values, and see, if gross rent multipliers and cap rates are what you're going to want to watch for on a local basis. And
Right.
then once those start to, get into a point, you see, because right now we've got interest rates higher than our cap rates, and that doesn't investments don't make sense when that's the case. The cap rates have to increase in accordance with the if your money costs you more than what you're bringing in on a return basis, then
Right.
it's not a deal that you want to go into. And
Right.
that is another reason why a lot of investors are on the sidelines right now. So those are those are the sources that you can look at, and then those are the number, or the uh, well, cap rate and gross rent multiplier are the parameters and the performance indicators of a property that you want to keep an eye on and make sure that they're in line with what you need to be. Your ROI has to be there. So
Right.
if you've got a
Yeah.
number that you want to pick out, say, well, I want a minimum of 5% return or 6% return, then you watch that cash on cash return, and that's going to change based on interest rates coming down, which is the cost of your money, and then interest or rents increasing.
Okay. Now you mentioned a second ago. You mentioned gross rent multiplier. Can you explain that for those who don't know what that is?
Okay, yeah, gross rent multiplier is taking your annual income and then uh, dividing your list price by that annual income. So if your monthly or your annual income is $120,000 on a 6 or 10 unit building, and your asking price is 1.9 million, then that's you take that income that that property is generating on an annual basis and
Mm-hmm.
divide it into your list price, and that will give you a number. The lower the gross rent multiplier, the better it is, the better deal it is. You want to, obviously different areas have different multipliers. In California, we've got things running anywhere from, 12 to 20 times gross. If you can get other areas that are under 10 times gross, I've seen. So, I mean, those are good numbers, but again, that's not a true indicator of what your value is. You want to look at your cash on cash return and your cap rate and see what those numbers are, and then analyze it from there, looking at, can you raise your rents, can you lower your expenses, and
Got it.
then either one of those is going to move those numbers back and forth.
Okay, so really, just like you were saying earlier, you just want to make sure you're bringing enough money that you can not only, just like you said, cash flow, but as well as you can kind of sustain yourself. Because if the numbers are
Right.
already in your deficit, if you're already going to take the L when it comes to expenses and things of that nature, it's already not looking bright on the other side as you come in. So that
Right.
makes perfect sense. So what? So as you talk about that, Mike, you talk about, you mentioned earlier 2009, 2008 crash arena time frame. For you, as someone who isn't just in multifamily, but as well you pay attention, large multifamily, but you also pay attention to residential. You look at the 1031 exchanges as we spoke about earlier. What are the similarities you're seeing that happened then that you see are happening the same way now? Because I feel like history repeats itself.
Right. I don't think there's a lot of similarities because you had different reasons for that downturn that
Mm-hmm.
occurred, and that was the financing that was so easy to obtain. Anybody could get a loan. Today it's
True.
different. I think what we're seeing, I've said this to other people, but I think what happened is we had a kind of I guess you could call it a similarity, but we had cheap money. The interest
Right.
rates were the lowest they've ever been.
Right.
What, 2%, 2.5%. So, it made a lot of difference between what could cash flow in over the last couple of years versus
Mm-hmm.
what it was previously. So a lot of properties, the values got driven up because the numbers made sense, and the rents were going up at the same time, and so there was factors that were increasing or pushing those values up, and those
Right.
factors weren't there back in 2006 through 2009. And but it's always something that's pushing those values up. The one similarity that I did see occurring just recently, and which was in the same as in 2006 through 2008, was multiple offers on properties and buyers bidding those properties, increasing the prices on them by having multiple offers and having everybody submit their best and final. So
Right.
there was a buying frenzy that occurred during both of these periods, and that is one similarity that we have. And that happened even back in 1980. I got licensed and really got into the market in 1989, but just prior to me getting into the market, I think it was in 87 and 88, there was a very similar type of a scenario. And with all these prices going up and multiple offers, and you list a property in one day, you've got 5 offers over asking price and all cash. But
Right.
it was the same type of scenario. And then a few years after that, they had a crash. I can't remember the exact year. I think it was 92 or 94, if I'm not mistaken. There was another kind of a downturn
Yep.
of the property values dropping. So each time you had this run up in values, you've had a multiple offer situation with buyers overpaying for properties just because it was a fear of missing out. They didn't want to miss out on the increased values.
Okay. 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 That's interesting. I didn't realize. I've always thought that history kind of repeats itself with everything. With as U.S. is our fashion, the food industry, everything, restaurants, everything that we do in our economy for the most part in the U.S. I feel like constantly repeats itself over and over and over again. It's interesting
Right.
to see that change has taken place on some other things, but the same thing that you saw then with the overpaying of prices. I've seen a multifamily unit that was being offered for 1.5 million, and the person who ended up buying it bought it for 2.5. First of all,
Yeah.
mind blowing, but it's just like you said, it's kind of a sign of the time that we're in right now. With that said, so speaking of deals, let's talk about what's a recent deal that you've done, either yourself or an investor that you've done that kind of made you proud, that you were excited to see, and of course excited. I'm sure you're excited to see all your clients go through great things. But what's been your favorite up to this point?
That's a tough one.
Mm,
I mean, I just recently I've sold a 3 unit building and a 4 unit building that I have this program I call the competitive sale program, and what it does is it kind of we price a property low, and then we had the buyer to generate interest in the property, and then we get the buyers interested in the property, and then they increase their price of their offer based on what they feel that they can afford. And
right.
I've had clients that have had properties on the market they couldn't sell. They've listed the property with me, and we've sold it within a week to 2 weeks. You know, they had it listed for 90 or 120 days with another broker. And, I've contacted them and said, look, this is the program we have. And, they're happy because they got the property sold and they got what they wanted and they got it done in a quick manner. So that's happened, a couple of times just with sellers who, like I say, they couldn't sell it because it was like a property that was, not a real desirable location.
Right.
But once it was looked at and by enough eyeballs, then those sellers were able to achieve what they initially wanted to get as far as a price and what they needed to get out of the property.
I
So
love it, Mike.
that's not from a buying standpoint, but from a seller standpoint.
Right.
So
Talk that stuff, Mike. Talk that stuff. Tell them how you do business. I like it. That's fantastic.
yeah,
All right, so
yeah.
you talked just now. You mentioned that you had a different approach when it came to the sale itself. Is that one of the main things that separates you from the other competitors in your area, the other realtors in your area, or is that just something that you decided to do and it's just kind of taken off from there?
Well, it's something I decided to do. Actually, I put together the program back when the pandemic started,
Okay.
and one of the reasons for that was because I wanted to be able to have the buyer or have fewer multiple buyer situations where they would go through a property because it was so, with COVID you had everything was you had to kind of stay away from everybody.
Right.
And I was trying to develop a program that gave all the information to a potential investor, basically the due diligence package that they would receive if they were have an offer accepted.
Right.
And but they had it all before they even wrote an offer on the property. And that program was because of, like I say, because of COVID, and it eliminated the amount of people that had to go into the building, and we had more control over it. It's actually turned out into a good thing because Remax has a an auction program that or a platform that they do worldwide, and the exposure through that is also very similar to the program that I have, where we provide all the documentation for the property to a potential a bidder, and
Mm-hmm.
then they at in turn will bid that price up through the auction process. And so that is one thing that I developed, and then now I've kind of moved it into the auction program that we have that is administrated through a third party, but they're affiliated with Remax Commercial.
What's always been interesting to me, particularly with the auction part, is that for some investors they always have a hard time because this auctions are normally as is. You may not get to go inside the property. You can do like the window look thing, but that's about as far as you can get. How have you been successful in the auctioning part of it as far as the properties? How are you navigating that space?
Well, typically what we do is we'll have a photographer, professional photographer, go in and take the interior photos
Mm-hmm.
and exterior, do a full drone video on the whole thing, and all the street view of the property, anything that we can get access to. We want to show everything to a potential buyer.
Right.
When you're buying multifamily properties, usually the only person that gets inside that property is the buyer that has an accepted offer. You have to set up an inspection and everything else. By having the access to the units before the property hits the auction market and before it's marketed, gives us the ability to show potential buyers what the interiors look like, because I've seen properties that are just destroyed inside
Right.
and tenants living in them, all the way up to very, very nice properties that
Right.
so the interior is, when you write an offer on a multifamily property, you're writing it subject to inspection, and
Right.
your offer is not accepted until you look at that interior. So that's a plus, to have all that information and any other income expense statements that for a potential buyer to look at. I've even, on the smaller properties, we've even gone in and had professional inspections done, where
Really.
we've had a professional inspection company go in and take photos of things that are wrong with the property, drippy faucets,
Right.
rotted ceilings, those types of things, so that a buyer knows what they're getting into. Termite inspection also, same thing.
Right.
So we get all that stuff done up front.
Okay, so sometimes you guys, sometimes at least in California, you are allowed into the property. I know a lot of them that I've seen myself. They wouldn't allow us in the property. We could only look through the window. It was always kind of the court
Right.
steps kind of thing, and that part has always been felt like the most sketchy thing, which is partly why I've never actually done any auction stuff, because it just felt like
Well,
too. It's just too sketchy.
the auction program that we have is not a distress sale. It's
Okay.
where what you're talking about is where it's a courthouse step type of a thing
Yep.
with, and it's a foreclosure or an REO, real estate owned by the bank. With
Right.
our situation, it's typically a private owner, and we can get access to the units because we have the owners in cooperation with the tenants, and everything's on the
Mm,
up and up. So
okay.
we have the ability to get in there on that. It's not a again, it's not a distress sale where you're buying it as is, and you don't see what it looks like until after you've put your bid in and it's
Right.
been accepted.
Right.
Kind of like flip that, what's it, flip or
Fi
flop, or fix and
Flipper, yeah,
flop. I
flip.
can't remember the name of
No, you're pretty close. I couldn't remember it either.
it.
Flipper flop, flipper flips.
Flip or flop.
But
I can't remember
yeah,
what it's called.
right. So, okay,
HGTV.
right, yeah, exactly. HGTV. They've got a lot of good shows on there that show that kind of thing. Let me ask you this then, Mike. 1031 exchange. Can you execute a 1031 exchange using that same auction program that you're using?
Yes, you can. It actually works pretty well because you have more control over the transaction with this auction program.
Okay.
You kind of know, your selling time frame is dictated by, when the property goes to auction, and then you've got a time frame of how long that auction is going to last. It's all done
Right.
online, so everything is all transparent. Everybody can see what's going on, online, and they've got a time frame that they want to end that auction, and as long as there's an acceptable price or
Bid.
bid
Right.
by a buyer, then they know when they're going to be going into escrow, and typically they know when they're going to be closing escrow. So in that same time frame, they can be out looking for properties even before they put the property up for auction. They can be out looking for properties, trying to maybe even tie one up as a buyer, and then going from there. But at least you know what your time frame is. You have more control over that escrow, over the timing of this actual sale.
Okay, that makes sense. I didn't think about that. That's actually having control over the purchase and the sale is always paramount to me when it comes to real estate. The more control you have,
Yeah.
the easier it is to execute things. So let me throw a scenario at you, Mike. All right, let's say you're in SoCal. You've got $1 million sitting on a 1031. You've already done the first part of it. You've already sold the property. You've got that money sitting in pocket now. What's your move? What's your next 3 or 4 steps to get that 1031? Because you only got, was it 30 days or something like that effect? 30, 90 days, something like that?
45,
45 days.
45 days to identify.
Please tell me,
Yeah.
please recognize that I am way off on my numbers, ladies and gentlemen, but it's
It's
all
okay.
right. So 45 days to identify. What's your move? You got $1 million in pocket. You've executed, got a 1031 sitting there. What are you going to do?
Well, I'm going to start combing the internet on any of the property websites that are out there. I'm also going to start reaching out to a lot of brokers and let them know that that's my position. I've got my property sold. I have to buy a property with, or identify at least a property within 45 days. If I get a call from a buyer and they're in a 1031 exchange, that's a priority buyer to me. I'm going to
Right,
focus my attention on that specific buyer to try and find him something, because I know he's under the timeline and he's got to buy something. So,
right,
he's going to end up doing a transaction, whether it be with me or with somebody else. But he's kind of, like I say, under the gun. So, as a buyer in that point, you've got to be reaching out to brokers and letting them know, hey, do you got any pocket deals, stuff that's not on the market? You got
right.
anything coming up that I might be able to get into? This is what I'm looking for. I'm looking for a 3 million, $4 million property in this area, in this quality. Tell me, let me know if you have anything. And then constantly trying to get in touch with these other agents, maybe even reaching out to specific owners if you have an area that you have isolated that is an area that you want to go into, or buy. Or if maybe you have another property that you own, reach out to the owners in that area and say, look, I'm looking to acquire some other properties.
Right.
I always look at real estate as, from an investment standpoint, is when, similar to playing the game of Monopoly. When you
Mm,
have all three properties, or Boardwalk and Park Place, for instance,
yep.
somebody lands on that, you're the guy that they got to pay. So you want
Absolutely.
to try and keep
Absolutely.
all your assets in one spot, because not only that, they're easier to maintain. You send a maintenance guy over there, he can go to two or three properties all within the one day and fix everything, versus having to drive 20 miles to one and then 20 miles to another one. So you're paying for his travel time too.
Right.
you know.
I can't tell you how many arguments my family has been in over the game of Monopoly. So that's 100% the absolute truth. You definitely want to get a hold of Park Place and the Blue properties in that sense. So, Mike, let's talk. Let's go back to a little, just a smidge. The 1031, and maybe I should have covered this before we got into 1031 exchange. But could you explain the 1031 exchange and how it works so everybody can understand that scenario we just spit?
Okay, so with a 1031 exchange, you put a property on the market, it sells, it goes into escrow. It either is in escrow or it closes escrow. From the time that property closes escrow, you have 45 days to identify one or three, up to three properties that you're going to close escrow on, one or more of those properties, using the proceeds from the sale of the property that you're selling. That's called your down leg. Your up leg property is the property that you're going to purchase using the proceeds from the sale of your down leg. You cannot take possession of any of those funds. You have to deposit. That money goes from the escrow company into an accommodator's account, and that accommodator holds that money. So you have a 45 day, you have 180 days total, and that's broken down into two different segments: the identification period, which is 45 days, and then you have 135 days to close escrow on one or more of the properties that you have identified. And so that's how the timeline works. And the accommodator takes the money that they're holding for you, and then they put it into the new escrow, and then that money is used to as a down payment. And you have to use 100% of the money from the sale of your down leg to purchase the property, which is your up leg. If you use any of the, or take out any of the money and put it in your pocket in another bank account, personal bank account,
Mm-hmm.
that's taxed as regular income, or capital gains tax. So it's called boot, what they call. any money that you pull out from the sale that is not being used to purchase the new property.
This is what happens when you talk to a specialist. This man knows what this man knows what he's talking about. Good stuff, Mike. All right, Mike. Let's hop into what we call the hot seat. Don't worry, ladies and gentlemen, there will be more from Mike, hopefully, God willing, later on. We'll do some more. Hopefully, we'll get Mike back on. But for now, we're definitely going to hop in the hot seat. So, Mike, the hot seat is this: it's simply 5 questions I'm going to ask you. They could be real estate related, or the answers could be real estate related or not. It's up to you. And that's what I'm going to give you right now. You ready?
Okay, go
All
ahead.
right, let's do this. What is the largest change that will happen to you in the next 5 years?
I'm probably going to be doing syndication deals. We're large buildings where with multiple investors and putting together syndications where I'm the general partner and I'm bringing in limited partners to, pooling money together, so to speak, to purchase, Class A or B properties, potentially even some C type properties that need some uh, repositioning being done, that type of a thing. That's kind of that is when you're in real estate. That's kind of the, I don't want to say holy grail, but it's the best thing that you can do when it comes to investing in real estate, and because you're tying up assets or you're working with assets that are multi-billion dollar extremely large investments, and you're getting a better return on that because there's not as many people in that with that ability to buy those properties. So that's where I'm kind of moving through to in the coming years.
Okay, I like it, Mike. Strictly for the A class. I like that A class property strategy is really good. I've seen quite a few people do it and been super successful with it. So I commend you on that. Here's cheers that it happens later on in the future. So next question: what has been the most underwhelming thing you've experienced?
Over my career, uh, it's probably been the downturn that we experienced in 2008, 2009. That
Mm,
was a real tough time for a lot of people in the business. And I see kind of a mirror type of effect with how things are progressing right now, with how that happened and what occurred, the layoffs that we saw, that time, the people getting out of the business, people losing their homes, people losing their businesses. That type of thing was probably the worst experience I've had,
right.
probably in my lifetime. It was just something to really to go through because there was no loans available.
Mm,
You had a buyer and a seller that wanted the seller wanted to sell, the buyer wanted to buy, but you couldn't get a loan. So how are you going to
uh,
finance a deal? How are you going to put together a property if you can't get financing? And that just was terrible. And it's not like that today, but you've got a lot of mortgage brokers and stuff like that, escrow companies that are being affected by this downturn, and they're having to lay people off, and agents are getting out of the business, or they're taking on second jobs, whatever type of thing. It's tough right now. It is.
yeah. That was the 100% overwhelming experience. Just from the outside looking in, and even then, I wasn't heavily real estate related at that time, but I was learning about it and seeing all the stuff that was happening was tough to see.
Yeah.
Now, let me ask you the reverse of that. What's been the most underwhelming thing in your career that you've seen?
Underwhelming. Well,
Underwhelming.
overwhelming was yeah. I mean, underwhelming. That's a tough one. Uh,
We ask the hard questions here.
Yeah, no, that one. Can we come back to that one?
Absolutely, of course, of course. I've got no problem with that. All right, let's go to the next one. If you had a personal robot, which task would they perform the most?
That would be telemarketing. That would be prospecting, reaching out to reaching out to potential, buyers and sellers, and trying to figure out, hey, are you interested in anything with real estate? Because they would be able to do that. Well, I'm not 24/7, but quite a few hours out of the day. So,
Mm.
that's really a key point in anything that, as far as my business goes right now, prospecting.
No, so by you saying that, that solidifies something that I've thought myself for years on end. Prospecting and cold calling, all that, that is one of the most difficult parts of real estate, whether you're wholesaling, whether you're an agent, whether you're multifamily, whatever you're doing, cold calling is there in some form or fashion. And my God, that is sometimes it's painful, but but it's
Yeah.
good. That's a
Well,
great answer. I do the same.
that is one of the oldest skills that you develop as a any type of sales type. You still have to do it. You can't
Absolutely.
cold email people and expect to get the same responses and the same building the rapport with people and stuff. You just don't get the same energy.
Yep. Regardless of what you do, you're gonna have to either get on the phone or see them in person. One of the two. It's just gonna
Right.
happen. That's a really good point, Mike. All right, Mike. Next question. What one rule would you make everyone follow in the world if you could?
Treat everyone as if you like you would want to be treated. The golden rule, basically. That's really, if I could have that to be everybody's common theme and common denominator, that would be what it is. Treat them like you want them to treat you.
I like it.
Pretty simple.
That is a simple answer, but that is a good one. All right, Mike. Next one. What is an unwritten rule that you believe everyone should follow?
Unwritten rule. Uh, just kind of doing what you said carrying through with what you
Say
promised
you're
or
gonna
what
do
you said you
right.
were going to do, not changing your changing the story after you've already committed to it in one way.
Got it.
Just there we have people in business in general. They'll say one thing and then they'll do something different, and you're proceeding as if what they told you is true,
Mhm.
and you want that's kind of how you're making your progress towards the goal that you're working towards. And if they switch it, maybe because for whatever reason they found something or learned something that they didn't know before, so they have to rearrange their thinking on stuff. But it changes everybody's mindset on what they've got to do. They've all got to refocus, and if you're too far along in something to where it's either costing you a lot of time or money,
Mhm.
then that's something that you have to go through and kind of reevaluate everything, and kind of refocus yourself. So just trying to, what I'm getting at is basically just doing what you say you're going to do when you tell somebody that that's what you are going to do.
Which oddly enough connects with your previous answer on the golden rule. You want to treat people the way you want to be treated. Nobody wants a promise that's never followed through. Those
Yeah.
absolutely suck. And then not to mention people are sometimes relying on you to come through what you said you're going to come through with. All right,
Right.
Mike, we're going back to the underwhelming one. What's
What
been the
was the
most
least
underwhelming thing?
underwhelming thing?
Yep, the most
Uh,
underwhelming thing in your career. I couldn't let you escape,
let's
Mike. I
see.
couldn't let you escape.
I know. I was hoping you'd forget about it. Probably, I would say, I wouldn't say it's one specific one or one specific transaction, but when I hate it when I get a property into escrow
Hmm.
and it ends up not closing. I
Oh,
don't have that happen very often, but it's extremely frustrating to have that occur because you've spent time working on getting the property sold, hoping that it goes into escrow, and for whatever reason it doesn't close escrow. It could be financing related, it just could be the buyer decides they don't want to go through with the transaction. It could be
right.
related to repairs that are necessary on the property that the buyer and seller can't come to an agreement on. But anytime I have a deal that falls out of escrow, because you're expecting it to close. When I put together a transaction, I try and put it together so I have all the pieces of it, as many as I know at least, in place so that it has only a slight chance of it not closing escrow. And
Right.
that's why I say most of my deals close escrow when they go when we open up escrow. I know that 90% of the time it's going to close. So it's frustrating and underwhelming, I guess you could say, for having an escrow not go through. And like I say, I haven't had a lot of them, but when they do, it's underwhelming.
Yeah, 100% it's underwhelming. I've actually most people I know that have been in real estate that's happened at least once or twice in their career, and
Right.
it's a tragic experience, but I feel like it's also par and course for being a real estate investor. It's just one of the experiences you're just gonna go through. There's nothing you can do about it. It's like cold calling. It's bound to happen at some
Right.
point. All right, Mike. So
Right.
the next thing we're going to do is what we call troop to task. And what troop to task is, it's a military term. And what we do is we tell a soldier, hey, so soldier Sergeant Snuffy, I want you to go from here to here. It's going to do this. What's one thing, one task you can give somebody who's listening right now that they can do to get started in the multifamily realm?
If I would go reach out to multifamily brokers,
Okay.
and, well, first of all, I would make sure I'm pre-qualified, find out how much you can qualify for. But then once you do that, and then obviously you've got to have funds available for the down payment and anything that you might for closing costs and stuff like that. But then once you have all that put together, the preliminary stuff that you need, reach out to multifamily brokers and say, look, this is what I'm looking for. Go and meet with them, sit down with them, and buy them lunch if that's what you got to do, or at least meet them in their office. Don't just pick up the phone and have a phone call with them, because we get calls from buyers all the time that want to they say, I'm looking for this, I'm looking for that.
Right.
If you go and you actually spend the time and meet with that broker face to face, shake their hand, everything else, they know you're a more serious buyer than somebody who's going to just email them, or like I say, pick up the phone. So that's what I would do if I was just starting out. And because the brokers know the market, they know the potential properties that are going to be coming on the market, or even sellers who don't want to list the property but they want to sell. They also know the pulse of the market. They know what's
Mm,
happening, what type of activity they're seeing on their listings that they have. How many phone calls, emails, text messages are they getting from potential buyers? How much activity? So they really know what's going on. So make friends with a couple, two, three, whatever you feel you need to do, and get a working relationship with those brokers, and make sure that they're going to be that'll make sure that you get access to potential deals that they might have.
Mike, my God, we're definitely gonna have to have you back. Mike. I'm definitely gonna have to have you back. I really want to go deeper into the broker part of it, but your time is valuable,
Okay.
and I respect and appreciate you for coming on. And thank you so much again for coming through. I want to make sure people are able to get a hold of you. How would you like for people to reach out to you and contact you if they're in the SoCal area or they're looking to invest in auctions and things of that nature?
Well, they can reach out to me, phone call, or email. You want me to give them that contact information?
Absolutely, give them everything, Mike. Just not your
Okay.
social or your credit
Uh,
card number.
okay. um, my phone number is 714-742-3700. That's my cell number. I answer it all the time unless I'm on the phone. And if you leave a message, I will call you back. My email address is mike@socalmultifamilybroker.com. And that you can go to my website, socalmultifamilybroker.com, get some insight on the market. I have a weekly email that I send out. I do a video with it sometimes. It's called the SoCal Multifamily Sales Pulse, and that'll give you all the information you need on kind of recent sales, statistics on both listings and sales. And so and that's all of Southern California that covers. So uh, that's my contact information, and that's where you can get some more information on our local market here.
I love it, Mike. And for those who are listening, what Mike told you about his site and the videos he does, I am telling you, even if you're not in the SoCal area, the information that you can glean from that and what he's looking at, what he's paying attention to, can tremendously help you in your own market, as well as if you could find yourself a Mike Lembeck in wherever you are, it's going to put you on the right path. Ladies and gentlemen,
Right.
thank you so much for tuning in. Mike, thank you again for being here. I look forward to having you on again here soon. Ladies and gentlemen, this has been the
All right.
Oliver Perry Show. We'll see you next time.
Take care.